What if the greatest crimes in history were not born from rage, nor hatred, nor madness, but from silence, from the quiet shuffle of shoes behind a desk, the polite nod of a head, the turning of a doorknob? What if the face of evil was not twisted in fury, but softened by duty, masked in bureaucracy, cloaked in obedience? You were taught that monsters roar, but what if they whisper? What if atrocity wears a tie, carries a clipboard, and clocks out at 5? And what if, in your quest to be good, to be decent, to follow the rules, you became a pawn in a ritual far darker than any villain could have conceived alone? There is something profoundly unsettling about the human desire to conform, the way a soul bends, folds, and vanishes under the weight of command. When we obey without thought, do we not offer our conscience on the altar of another's will? Perhaps the most terrifying truth is not that we are capable of evil, but that we are capable of committing it with a clean conscience, so long as someone else signs the order. This is not about history. It's about you, about how the obedient child becomes the unquestioning adult, about how the man who once played with fire now fears the spark of his own thought, who benefits when you surrender your judgment, who profits when you kneel to an idea you didn't birth. The world is not divided between heroes and villains, but between those who ask and those who follow. And when no one asks, when no one dares to pierce the veil, the abyss opens. You were given a spine not to bow, but to stand. Yet every day, invisible hands mold your choices, shape your fears, teach you to say yes even when your bones scream no. This is not obedience. This is self-erasure. And the most banal thing about evil is not its presence. It is how comfortably it slips in the fabric of the ordinary, how easily it blends into uniforms, into protocols, into the lull of normalcy. But tell me, when does the erosion of your soul begin? With the first order or the first silence? Do you truly know where your morality ends and where the herd begins? Can you be certain the voice you hear inside is yours, or just an echo of someone else's expectations? You were taught to listen, but never taught to resist. You were trained to respond, but never trained to refuse. And now, as the machine grinds forward, oiled by 1,000 small yes, the question is no longer what would you do, but rather, what are you already doing without knowing? The horror is not at the gates. It is in the mirror, in the shrug, in the smile that hides unease. So pause and tell me, honestly, if the machinery of evil needed just one more cog and your name was called, would you notice or would you obey? They called it duty. They wrapped the word in metals, stitched it onto uniforms, whispered it like prayer. But duty, that polished idol, is often nothing more than obedience made sacred. And obedience, obedience is a ghost in velvet gloves. It does not scream. It does not strike. It waits. It waits in classrooms that punish the questioner, in families that reward silence, in temples that fear the wild. You were taught to lower your voice, to bow your head, to become manageable. And so you did, not because you were evil, not because you didn't care, but because you trusted, because you were afraid to be alone in your no. And that is where the fracture begins, not in cruelty, but in comfort. History does not repeat itself. It obeys. It follows instructions. Every genocide, every purge, every horror that stains the soil of this world began with someone who believed they were simply doing what they were told, following orders, respecting hierarchy, maintaining peace. But what is peace if built on silence? What is respect if paid with the coin of complicity? The question is not, how could they? The question is, why did anyone stop them? And when you ask that, when your voice trembles with disbelief, know this, someone asked it then, too. Someone felt the same knot in their throat. And they, like you, were alone in a room where everyone else nodded. What broke them wasn't hatred. It was a way to the obvious, ignored by all, the unbearable pressure of clarity in a sea of blindness. There is a violence and passivity more insidious than any scream, the kind that doesn't leave blood but erases names, the kind that does not strike the flesh but amputates identity. You do not see the moment it begins, because it begins within. In the moment you tell yourself it's not your place, that someone else knows better. That questioning would cost too much, so you fold just a little. You tighten the mask. You tell yourself it's temporary, but the bending becomes a posture, and the posture becomes your form. And before you realize, you are no longer choosing. You are enacting a role, a script, a version of you authored by invisible architects. And who are they? Perhaps they no longer exist. Perhaps they never did. Perhaps the real tyrant is the part of you that wants to belong. We do not commit the worst evils through desire, but through dissociation, through the part of us that disconnects from our own trembling hands, that watches from behind the eyes as if the body were a machine and the soul a witness, that says, asterisk, I had no choice. Asterisk that says, asterisk, it wasn't me, it was a system. Asterisk, but systems are not born. They are fed. They are oiled by every yes that should have been no. And each time we silence the voice inside that resists, that voice grows quieter, until one day it is gone, and we are left with a hollow shell of a being who still moves, still speaks, still smiles, but does not live. That is the banality of evil, not its intensity, but its emptiness, the fact that it does not require monsters, only absence. And yet, within that absence, there is a seed, a crack in the silence where the question waits. Asterisk, what if I stopped? What if I spoke? What if I broke the chain? Asterisk, these are not grand revolutions. They are intimate rebellions. A teacher who refuses to lie. A soldier who lays down the gun. A child who says no and means it. And that, perhaps, is what they fear most. Not resistance, but awakening. The moment the cog remembers it was never a cog. The moment the mask slips. The moment you see through performance of normalcy and realize that obedience, unchecked, is not virtue. It is surrender. It is complicity. It is forgetting your own weight, your own breath, your own fire. So ask yourself, not if you were disobeyed then, but if you are obeying now. Not what they did, but what you are doing. And if, in this very second, your silence is protecting someone else's power, and perhaps now, in the hush that follows the unraveling, you begin to hear it, that subtle dissonance between who you were told to be and what you now feel pulsating beneath your skin. It is not a scream. It is not a revelation wrapped in thunder. It is a murmur, ancient, patient, echoing from the place inside you that never fully surrendered. You carry it in your breath, in the tremble of your fingertips, in the hesitation before every automatic yes. The question that never dies: who am I when no one is watching, when no one is commanding, when no one is left to blame but me? The true terror was never the tyrant. It was 1,000 quiet hands that built his throne. The mothers who told their sons to obey. The workers who stamped papers without reading names. The neighbors who closed their windows to cries in the dark. And now, as these faces dissolve into memory, what remains is a shape they left in us, the subtle curve of our own submission. You are not separate from this history. You are its continuation, or its rupture. And rupture begins not with revolt, but with remembrance, with the sacred violence of seeing clearly, of no longer pretending that your small choices do not ripple outward like ink and water. Every law, every system, every chain ever forged, it all depends on a single belief that you will not resist, that you will keep walking, keep nodding, keep performing the role. But roles are prisons carved from habit. and prisons can be left, not shattered but outgrown, like old skin, like inherited lies. This, then, is not an ending. It is a return, not to the world as it is, but to yourself as you were before you learned to obey, before you silence your own questions to avoid standing alone in the unbearable light of truth. So ask yourself quietly, as if whispering into the hollow where your fear once lived, what do I consent to by doing nothing? Whose voice is speaking when I say yes? And if I do not answer now, when the way of the past has already cracked the illusion, then when, because the banality of evil is not its absence of conscience, but the burial of it under comfort, and perhaps that's the most dangerous myth of all, that to be good is to be obedient, when in truth, to be truly good is to dare to disobey. If even a single word carved a space within you, if something stirred where once there was stillness, let that movement become gesture, like not to agree, but to affirm you are awake. Comment, not to speak, but to begin listening deeper. Share, not for us, but for the one who, like you, is ready to remember. And subscribe not as a follower, but as one who has decided the time for silence is over